Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new episode of The React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me, excuse me, is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Good to see you guys in the chat, filing in. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure it's working okay. And hit that subscribe and notification bell as well while you're at it as we push towards 10,000 subscribers here on the channel. Big deal for us, and we're getting close. So tell a friend, get them in here, and get them subscribed. What is going on, Pete? How are you, sir?
I'm here. That's about as far as we're going right now. But we are 2.5 weeks from the start of training camp, so that's something. We're almost getting close to about halfway through the dead period, so we're moving.
Yeah, the sooner it gets here, the better in my book. But so we missed last week. I want to start here with you. We missed last week by a day the Okaranquo release.
We did.
So, just a couple thoughts on that. It was expected, right? No huge surprise. Do you think they give him a chance? Do you think that did they ever give him a chance or try to renegotiate his deal down to exchange some guaranteed money for a lesser deal, or was it always just they wanted to cut the $6 million?
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem is they weren't willing to guarantee him. I think ultimately they would have wanted to restructure him, but they weren't willing to guarantee him money now because that would mean they were guaranteeing him a roster spot. I don't think they were ready to guarantee him. So he'd be a sucker to take that deal at this, or he'd essentially be agreeing to renegotiate later. So
yeah,
he'd be better off being cut because if all else failed, he could theoretically re-sign later with the Browns if that's what he wanted to do. Ultimately, he was never going to get the $6 million based on how he played. The Browns had signed Joe Tryon for, I believe, $4.13 million guaranteed. So right there, that $10 million between what we're going to be the third and fourth, potentially fifth edge guys, because Alex Wright's also in the mix at $3.4 million. He's the oldest pass rusher in that room at 30. And they've sort of just transitioned. So, there's an element where you hold on to him because his contract wasn't negotiated well in terms of providing a natural out date. Almost every contract anymore has some sort of roster bonus attached. So, which would have likely included, the second or third day of the league year. Had they included language like that, the Browns almost certainly cut him in March. He gets to go out there with everybody else when free agency starts and everybody's sort of at their most willing to spend, and he potentially gets a new deal. Without that language, the Browns essentially hold on to him, see what the landscape is in terms of who they've got. How does Alex Wright look? How does the undrafted free agent Aiden Huntington look? And they've got 5 other defensive ends on this team beyond all those guys. You see if somebody's going to call and offer you anything. I think basically the league, all 31 other teams, basically said, we're not going to trade for him to pay him $6 million. We might as well just see if he's going to get released and then potentially sign him at that point. And there are teams that need more pass rush help. He didn't play very well this past year. He's much better in 2023. But the teams can't have enough pass rushers. So I think there's going to be somewhat of a market for him. And in some ways, this is sort of the Browns doing right by the player and the agent by saying, look, we haven't gotten an offer. We could hold on to him until cut down day, but what's the point? And this gives him the best chance to sign with a new team before the start of training camp, which is, I'm sure, why he tweeted out his appreciation and everything else. So they had some options, but I think this is ultimately the one that made the most sense for all parties involved.
Do you still feel okay about the edge room? Because although he didn't play well last year, he's still a useful player, which is the thing, right? Like it happens, right? When there's $6 million on the books and he didn't play well last year, he didn't live up to his contract, but he was still a useful player in a sort of a way. Like, we don't really know what Joe Tryon is going to be in this wide nine. They've projected what they think he's going to be, right? But basically, he's taking his spot. Basically, it feels like. So now you're with Garrett, McGuire, Alex Wright, and Joe Tryon, and without Okaranquo in there, it just sounds like a little bit lesser room, right? You're not quite as deep. Now you do have Aiden Huntington, who you're high on, and some other guys there. So are you comfortable with where they're at edge rusher?
No, but I wasn't going to be comfortable with it anyway.
Okay.
Like, listen, wanted Abdul Carter, wanted Donovan Ezraku. Like, I wanted more dudes.
Yeah.
Having said that, not having Okaranquo didn't change much for me. To me, I think you throw all those guys in the same basket. Okaranquo, Tryon, Alex Wright. The difference is that Tryon, one, has guaranteed money and is younger. Alex Wright, much younger. And then, if Huntington Huntington's the best example because he's 23. If he's able to show enough that he's interesting, especially as potentially the fifth guy, they're going to have every incentive to keep him over an Okaranquo. They've got Cam Thomas, who I'm at least interested in. They've got who am I missing? Ellerson Smith, Sam Kamara. They've got the lesser Aquara brother. I mean, they have a million guys. That's the other part. I think that's the other benefit this has. They want to get more reps with particularly Tryon, Wright, potentially Huntington, to see those guys either figure it out or decide that potentially in August that they have to bring in somebody else. They need to find that out, and the only way they're going to do it is by getting those guys on the field, getting as much work as possible. And I think from that standpoint, Okaranquo potentially dilutes the field. Now, they do have a little bit of leeway in that they could give Myles Garrett a whole bunch of days off once he's sort of good to go, and they can sort of get more guys reps. But still, I think it becomes overly crowded. I think Jim Schwartz sort of knows what he wants, and it's just a matter of he's basically tasking Jacques Césaire to get it for him in terms of getting it out of Joe Tryon, who they like, getting it out of Alex Wright if he can stay healthy, hopefully from an edge spot. And the same thing if it's Huntington, who I maintain fits what Jim Schwartz wants. Whether or not he can deliver when the pads come on remains to be seen. I just think they were sort of done with Okaranquo in his current form. And again, if he's not signed and the Browns are sitting there in August and they don't feel good about it, they could always bring him back. I think he's going to end up somewhere else, but somebody else could. I mean, like right now, whether it's Okaranquo or Zadarius Smith, those guys are still available. So
yeah,
there's still movement to be made in terms of some of these free agents right ahead of training camp who didn't want to deal with the mini camp mess.
Yeah. All right. I think that's fair. Julian Aquara is interesting. Huntington's interesting. And like you said, there's some guys out there as well. Okay. Just trying to sort out what we got going on in the chat. World's fastest, you seem confused. I'm not sure what you're confused about, brother. All right. We got some stadium news right here, and we'll talk about it off the top of the show. 600, well, the budget, state budget, including $600 million in funding approved by Mike DeWine. Team bought the land officially last week for $76 million. A mixed-use development with a price tag of $3.6 billion, Pete. Goal is to be ready for the 2029 season, which means they would like to break ground early next year. is that feasible to break
What?
ground early next year and to have this? I'm going to throw this video up while we're doing this, while we talk about this. But this is just a little video that I have of. We'll do this. There we go. Remove, add. There we go. Is it possible to have this ready by 2029?
That I don't know. I mean, they've scheduled this out. I mean, you're asking, is it feasible for them to break ground by next spring? It damn well better be. I mean, there's a part of you that's sitting there going, why isn't Zagura out there with a shovel right now? Like,
right.
Obviously, it's a huge project, so there's a lot that goes into it. But seemingly the Browns have been planning for this for months and years and everything else. So in terms of equipment, in terms of personnel, which most of which will be imported, no matter what anyone wants to tell you, if they think they're going to hire 5,500 construction workers out of Northeast Ohio, they're out of their minds. But you still got to organize that stuff, and you got to be able to deal with that stuff. You got to deal with the potential weather of, obviously this thing's going to take years to build. So planning around when the ground gets cold enough and all that stuff. So that's all outside of my level of expertise. But do I? So yeah, I think it's feasible. And again, I think there are probably most people sitting there going, why aren't they working on it right now? Why isn't Jimmy Haslam out there getting this thing going? But beyond that, I mean, they've scheduled this thing out. The engineer or the architect has done a number of these. I'm sure they've had any number of engineers and stuff sort of measure out how long this should take. Obviously, it comes down to, something going wrong or something weird happening in terms of materials or anything else. Hopefully, they've planned and sourced all that out before they get going. But yeah, it should be. I mean, you would think in this day and age, 4 years is more than enough to get this type of thing done. And then the other question, that's just the stadium part. It really comes down to how much is going to be done in terms of maybe the stadium's functional, but what's it going to take to get all the other stuff going? Or are they going to try to build it all at once? That, I'm sure as they start going with this thing, we're going to learn more, a little bit more about it. But I have to think that the Browns have planned this out, or I should say, I would hope they've planned this out to know when everything should be ready to go, not only from when it starts, but like stages, what it should look like by date X and so on until it's ready to be complete in what they estimate is 2029.
Yeah, 2020. I mean, that obviously lines up directly with the end of the lease at the stadium, which is what they want, obviously. So that seems fast, I guess, for me. Some of these other places have taken a lot longer, it feels like, to build. Am I crazy for thinking that?
I honestly don't know. I mean, they threw up Cleveland Brown Stadium way too fast and shabbily. So I'm hoping that the 4-year window they have is going to allow them to do everything they need to do to make this done correctly. So that I'm not sure, with like SoFi and some of these others are a little bit bigger projects. But it still seems like 4 years should be more than enough.
Okay, fair. What do you think of this rendering here? Looks spectacular, right?
Well, it's sort of what I said all along. The Browns were going to make this look all of this look great. They had every incentive to make this look great. And one of the things that I was a little surprised by how poorly the city handled this whole situation. If they were smart, they would have sort of like played indignant, but ultimately resigned to their fate and gotten as much money out of Haslam as possible to redo the lakefront district. Instead, they did all these weird tactics that sort of potentially created some bad blood and could potentially cost somebody like Mayor Bibbs his an election down the road. Because if Haslam decides to hold a grudge and decides he's going to do as little as possible for Cleveland, now because of how they handled this, then it's a huge losing situation. When one, Cleveland never had an argument. Two, Cleveland can't afford it. They needed to sort of pivot into reality that Cleveland's not in a position to build a stadium that like this, beyond the fact that the Browns were never interested in doing it, so it was a non-starter anyway. But even if they did, like, you were going to build a massive complex they didn't really have space for. You were going to build it in a city where the vast majority of citizens can't afford to go to the thing you're building.
Yeah.
And they fought tooth and nail. And then you had that, what I don't remember his position, Romaine, who then puts it like, you have these sleek designs in these videos and the Browns are selling it really well. And then, you know, the county or whatever he's part of releases a rendering that looks like an old wooden roller coaster is trying to eat the stadium. Yeah. It just looked like crap. Everything about what their side was doing with this whole thing made the stadium look worse. And from that standpoint, you thought maybe they were tanking this thing to try to like expedite the dome stadium process, but no, they were actually trying to fight for this thing. Losing battle was never going to happen. That's the only part of this I was surprised by. You know, I still have the same criticisms I had of this whole process from the word go, which is taxpayer money should never have been involved. But even if it was going to be involved, voters never got any chance to say anything about it. It was taken completely out of their hands. Yes. And now this sets a horrible precedent for the rest of the state, because now, you know, the Cincinnati Bengals worked out their lease agreement in Cincinnati. There's nothing that prevents them from coming with their hand out in a couple of years saying we need, whether it's $600 million or more, to help us build it. You've got the Guardians, who sort of, in retrospect, misplayed their hand relative to getting state money to potentially refurbish stadiums. All of this to bail out people who shouldn't need this type of money to afford these projects. Certainly Jimmy Haslam didn't need it, but it's cheaper, and he's certainly not alone in this. It's cheaper to make campaign contributions to guys he needs to win over. That's way cheaper than ponying up the actual amount himself and subsidizing it so he can privatize the profit and subsidize, you know, socialize the potential losses on this whole thing. So he continues to renew his license to print money. All of that frustrates me. But, you know, now that it's set, I hope that it ends up being productive, because traditionally these type of stadium projects never work out for the locality, even with what they're trying to do, which I'm rooting for to be successful. I would love this Brook Park thing to be this burgeoning sort of new, you know, metropolitan area that's super successful and drives, you know, Cleveland in sort of to the next 50 years or whatever it's going to be. But the process for this thing sucked. I didn't like how it was framed, in terms of it was just accepted that the Haslams were going to get this massive handout, as opposed to arguing the point of whether they should. But that's sort of where we're at with this thing, where the NFL was going to get this done. They were going to get it done in Brook Park, and they're going to get $600 million that beyond the state of Cleveland, I don't think the state of Ohio can afford it.
Yeah, I know it seems like so much, but then you look at how much it is compared to what it's going to cost in totality, and you're like, well, they're really not chipping in that. I mean, it's a huge amount of money, obviously, for the state. They can't afford it, to your point. But yes, in totality,
realistically, the project. If the system made sense in this case, the city or the state of Ohio should get $600 million worth of an ownership stake. But that's not how it works.
Correct. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I have questions here. So some of this is kind of cool here, but all right. The closest first and last row seats in the NFL. Very cool, right? Close to this field. Gotta love that. Largest locker room in the NFL.
They need it.
Largest concourse in the NFL. Okay, awesome. Largest fan wall in the what? What is a fan wall?
I think that's going to be one of the ends of the stadium where people are seated, and it's going to sort of be like they're. I don't think they're going to call it the dog pound. I don't remember if they're calling anything the dog pound, but I think that is going to be their stand-in where one end of the field is going to be the seating is so much more vertical than everything else that it's going to look like a
soccer
wall.
Stadium. They said,
huh?
They said the one end will be kind of like a soccer stadium.
Yes,
straight up. Yeah.
So they want that to sort of be their defining trademark in terms of creating a home field advantage.
Yeah, man. It sounds like the seats can be right on top of the field, which is really cool, and I like that. And I love that the one aspect I do like of it is that you're going to have the technology where you're going to be able to see the sky at all times, right? And it melts away the snow, it does all that stuff, right? But you have this clear view of even on a nice, beautiful day, the sunshine will still kind of shine into the stadium.
Right. And this is the one, I guess, benefit to this whole the size of these projects. It demands that the Browns do this in a way that's going to maximize the fan experience because they are going to charge, and obviously a huge amount in terms of ticket prices. And in order to sell those, they have to give people a reason to go. You have to, I mean, there obviously so much of this is like in January, they still want, someone to be willing to take their family to this thing and not like sort of dread the parking and the standing out in the freezing cold and everything else and be leaving. But you also have to compete against your TV experience. You're paying thousands of dollars now for season tickets potentially, and hundreds of dollars to go even for a single game.
Yep.
You can just get a really nice TV or living room setup or whatever, and for the same cost, and have potentially a better experience. So now you are as an NFL team, and the Browns are competing against that. So you've got to really deliver for people to want to do that. So that's why they're trying to sell these features. And if they hit them, yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously that's the goal. You want it to feel where it creates a legitimate home field advantage for the Browns. Certainly there's value in that, but the return on investment makes people feel good about their purchase, that they're excited to go there. And it doesn't turn into sort of what some of these other stadiums, including the current Brown Stadium has, which is a very corporate feel. I guess in some ways that's inescapable, but you're hoping the experience is good enough that it sort of makes it impossible for them not to be into the action and anticipating going to these games.
Yeah, I don't want that either. I hope that just it being in Cleveland, naturally lends itself away from some of that. You're still going to have the diehards, right? And it's still going to feel like a Browns game and not that corporate feel that you're talking about.
Sure. But the other part of it is also whatever other events they're attracting. That's the other thing with these various accoutrements to the stadium is it's obviously going to be huge for the Browns and that atmosphere. And that's obviously going to be what they're leading for this. But they've got to crush it in terms of making this venue attractive for all the other stuff they want to do. So there's a lot of pressure for them to nail that part of this. So if it works, it could be great. But if you're sitting there and you're asking, are the taxpayers going to get return on investment? The answer is going to be no, they're not. That's not how this stuff works. But you're going to get hopefully a state-of-the-art stadium that you at least get to enjoy in a way that this last stadium, didn't give you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. All right, you're watching the React. This is the OBR streaming network. I'm Brad Ward. That's Pete Smith. So the stadium is going forward. I don't think there's any stopping it now. They, they got that Modell law, taken care of in the cover of darkness at 1:30 a.m. last week or whatever, when they passed the bill at 1:30 in the morning or whatever it was. Craziness. But it's all good and sounds like it's full speed ahead here for 2029. So if you like it or don't, I guess you kind of got to get used to it at this point, right? If you're gonna,
well, I mean, look, I'll criticize the process, but listen, I'm hoping that the end result is good for everybody as much as it can be. Like, I don't want them to build a crappy stadium. I mean, the state of Ohio is in this thing. I hope they crush it. Obviously, I would like them to have a better football team as well as everything else. Like, I'm hoping we get to a point where, people feel, even if it's sort of, again, not a great investment necessarily, but people at least feel good about what they're getting from it. That's ultimately what everybody's going to be rooting for, or should be rooting for in this scenario.
Didn't you think, as far as the product on the field, don't you think the stadium does provide, at least when we get to 28, 29, I don't know where the team is going to be at that point, but hopefully it's in a good place, right? And switching from the old stadium to the new one does give you some kind of organizational momentum. If you recall, at least back when the Indians moved from Cleveland Stadium into Jacobs Field, they were getting good at the time and had a bunch of young, good players. And that was like their jumping off point.
It has the potential. I mean, obviously, with the former Indians, now Guardians, Dick Jacobs was willing to pay a bunch of money, and he was super aggressive. But yes, they crushed their farm system and got everything going. Yeah, that's obviously the goal. And look, as this thing gets built, and outside of basically Myles Garrett, who, I don't know how many guys on this team are going to be on the team at that point. But as they get closer, and hopefully some of these guys are going to be sticking around for a while, undoubtedly they're going to get previews of this stuff and be able to sort of, social media and post all this stuff and show it off. And you're hoping that gets more people sitting there going, one, you get those guys are excited about it. And then that translates into potentially attracting players if they feel like it's a great great stadium setup or a great facility, including there's other elements to this. I mean, keep in mind, the stadium in 2029 is the biggest piece of this whole thing. But by hopefully in 2027 is what they're aiming to be completed with the stuff in Berea. That hopefully it's a run of momentum that makes the players feel good about this situation. Ultimately, the best case scenario for the Browns is, they end up in a situation where the Browns can enjoy a similar reputation as the Minnesota Vikings. That is the top of the line. Maybe in terms of states you might not think about, or locales you might not think of professional athletes wanting to play, but they absolutely love that organization, facilities, everything top of the line. And that's a big reason why players are willing to re-sign there, be willing to sign there in free agency and everything else. If the Browns can sort of enjoy that similar level of, esteem, that would be huge for them. Right now, obviously we saw the NFLPA report card. They're trying to address a number of those things, but that's an issue that hurts you on some of these things. So you want to make this as easy as possible. Certainly having a dome, again, like Minnesota has, helps because you get guys who are playing in, who grew up in Georgia and Florida and aren't excited about potentially going in the snow and feel a little bit better knowing that they're going to be heading to a place with a dome, even if they're going to have to still go outside occasionally. All those things are helpful. And fans, I know there's still a number of fans who are going to sit there and whine about not playing outdoors and do it. Most of them doing it from their own homes, not at the game. But players, do players enjoy the occasional snow game? Absolutely. Sure. Do players want to deal with that, multiple times every season and potentially in games that should not be played? No, there's a point where it becomes stupid. And the problem you have is like weather is supposed to be the great equalizer. Your goal is to be the better team, in which weather is now not helping you because you are it would be hurting you at that point. The best teams are hurt by weather games. It's the lesser team that sort of benefits. You get guys into the muck. It helps the lesser team. Your goal is to be the best team, and not and at that point, climate controlled conditions are your best situation.
My understanding is that it will be turf, not grass, actual like not astroturf, but it'll be they said the best, most modern product they can put out there that's artificial at that point in 2029.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these systems you can the brand new soccer stadiums that keep coming out with the engineering involved to allow them to slide the grass in is incredible. I would certainly prefer, I know players would certainly prefer to be able to get that. But we'll see where they end up on that. If it just becomes unquestionably, they're just going to go with the best turf. But the data keeps coming back more and more that grass is better. And, that would be certainly, maybe field turf. I don't know. That part, I would hope they're going to come up with the best possible scenario the players are happy with. We'll see.
Yeah, Chef's saying it's field turf like in Europe. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to see how that looks and what they go with there. So, all right. It does speed up the game, that's for sure. All right, let's transition here so we've got a couple different videos to start this aspect of the show tonight. So PFF did a segment, Pete, where they went through every team's reasons for optimism. Okay. And so this is their segment on the Browns. And then we're going to shift to after that, which is very interesting, the 33rd teams reacting to the grades given on the Browns offseason by Bleacher Report and their old website, PFF. So we'll start with this one and then go to that one. But it's interesting. They disagree quite a bit here as far as grading the offseason for these teams. So,
Garrett, I think there's three. That we could have gone with here. Myles Garrett is one of the biggest and most obvious ones. So I'll talk about who I think are the other two maybe reasons for optimism here for a team that might struggle quite a bit this upcoming
It's Shedeur Sanders, right?
No Shedeur Sanders is actually one of the
Oh, wow, you're not even messing with me. Okay.
No, I mean, he has to be, right? Because you look at how he played in Colorado over the last 2 years, like whether he's the week one starter or not, he kind of has to be a reason for optimism, right? Because you clearly, I know you had him as QB1 in this past class. So even though I was a little bit lower on him, I thought he was more of, like a mid-day 3 type of a value quarterback. To get him in the 5th round, especially to the current quarterback situation that the Browns have, you are hoping that you get an absolute gem in Shedeur Sanders and that he's starting at some point and that he shows you starting caliber capabilities at the NFL level. So genuinely, like no trolling, he is one of the other reasons of optimism if he can gain that starting role for them. But you didn't go with Sanders. You ended up going with Myles Garrett. I'll tell you who the other one was after you kind of explain why you went with Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, he's arguably the best defensive player in football, right? And anytime you just have number 95 out there, your front seven's going to be formidable. And you look at this team, they still led the league in run defense grade last year. I believe they were 3rd in pass rush grade as a team. And Myles Garrett, when he's on the field, he just changes everything. He makes everyone else around him better, and now they've got a top 5 pick at defensive tackle in Mason Graham as well. If there's anything that's going to allow the Browns to win games this season, it's going to be their front seven like it usually is, because Myles Garrett is absolutely unblockable. Whether it's 2, 3, 4 guys blocking him, it doesn't matter. He's one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and he gives you a chance to, at least your defense, a chance to keep your team in a game while your offense is obviously trying to figure out the quarterback situation, the running back situation, basically everything on the other side of the ball. But this Browns defense, as long as Garrett stays healthy and he's Myles Garrett, they're going to be able to keep them in games.
So the only other one that I was going to bring to the table is obviously Kevin Stefanski, right? Multi-coach of the year type of a guy. If there's anybody that can squeeze the most out of a roster that seems sort of in flux right now, you would hope that it would be a coach of the year candidate in Kevin Stefanski. So he is the third one there. I think your only choices for the Cleveland Browns is, the dominance of Myles Garrett, the head coaching acumen of Kevin Stefanski, and then can Shedeur Sanders kind of save things for you at some point.
Oh boy. All right. Thoughts?
I mean, I would say the whole defensive line more than
Yep.
just Myles Garrett. I don't have a problem with that answer. It's just, even using PFF's grading, Isaiah McGuire was a stud last year. He could potentially be a breakout star. He's not even 24 yet. Mike Hall, very promising in limited action. Juwan Briggs, very impressive as a 7th-round rookie. You drafted Mason Graham. Those are the homegrown guys you've brought on this team. If Alex Wright can sort of figure it out, that's another homegrown guy. That suddenly, last year, the year before, particularly 2023, it was, okay, the defensive line's really good, but it's also old. And how are they going to bridge the gap? And in these last couple of years, they've added basically 2 guys a year. Alex Wright certainly has a shot to be part of it. Isaiah McGuire, certainly, he came in with Siaki Ika, who couldn't play dead, but he's as good as Ika is bad. So that's a huge win. And then both Briggs and Hall look good. And then this year you get Mason Graham, and I'll hold out hope for Aiden Huntington. And you go from a line which included Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson, Zadarius Smith, a bunch of older guys, Okaranquo, even though at the time he was 28, and Myles Garrett, is getting closer to 30. But now it's Myles Garrett. Malik Collins is brought in, who's 30. Shelby Harris is now going to be 34 if he makes this team. Everybody else is, I think, 26 and under. Which is what you want. So that becomes a huge benefit. I agree with the Kevin Stefanski point. He's an excellent coach. Obviously has a lot to prove this year to sort of maintain that status. Again, I don't think the Browns are either thinking about going in with the mindset of we're just going to lose a whole bunch of games and get a quarterback. I think they're going to try to build this thing as much as they can and try to, be who they say they want to be, which is that earned toughness, get these young guys going in a way that's going to be sustainable, get them to improve, build their confidence, and sort of improve into something where then they can add a quarterback if they don't already have one on the roster and go from there. And then I don't have a problem with them saying Shedeur Sanders. I think you could say Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, honestly, because they're just swings. They are swings at the most important position, and you need that position. Joe Flacco's 40, younger than LeBron James, but nevertheless 40. Kenny Pickett is a swing, reasonable enough. I still don't like giving him the draft pick for him, but whatever. If he's good, if he figures it out and clicks, and he has a Sam Darnold type year, you'd sign up for keeping him around if nothing else for the franchise tag in a heartbeat. You need to get that. But if either Gabriel or Sanders can really hit this thing, then all of a sudden you are in a position where you're ready to go. Now, can they reach that level? I don't know, but they are sort of the mystery box in that element where until they've proven they can't, they theoretically can. So from that standpoint, I think it's those two, but I think it's larger than that. I think it's the process of which they are trying to get to the next quarterback. It's being willing to bring in Pickett, Gabriel, Sanders, and then having 2 first-round picks in next year's draft. So if you don't get enough out of those guys, if nobody's going to sort of wow you enough to go, okay, we're going to stick with these guys, now you're ready to add one of those guys, one of the top quarterbacks in what looks like a very strong class, potentially having another first-round pick to use on something else in addition to the full allotment of your other picks. You're that much closer being done with Deshaun Watson, and you can start really building around who that next guy is going to be.
Reasons for I would have pointed to, excuse me, my allergies are terrible. I'm losing my voice slowly but surely here today. But you can't beat them, man. It's brutal. But I would point to this rookie class as like a reason for optimism, just as a whole.
Sure.
I think like you can go, boy, their running backfield is extremely talented going forward, and therefore, the run game should look better. Stefanski kind of is part of that, right? As you're kind of turning back into what he does best, or what this offensive line wants to do as an identity. But certainly I would say the running back, and then point towards Fannin as well on the offensive side of the ball as an aspect that I'm optimistic about that they will be able to do. In the chat here, they have pointed out, a couple people pointed out, Pete, and I just wanted to mention this, that they believe safety is very thin. I would push back against that at this point. I think that they did a good job bringing in KZ and Jenkins. I don't feel like it's thin there. I feel like if they're trying to give what's his name?
Ronnie
Hickman his chance, but if he doesn't earn it, I feel comfortable with using either KZ or Jenkins, who can kind of do both in the back end of this defense. I wouldn't consider it thin.
Right. Look, it's finding the other guy other than Grant Delpit. And obviously the Browns like to run 3. I still think they're going to end up in a world where Ronnie Hickman is the other guy, the base guy, and then Casey's going to end up in the nickel, and Rayshon Jenkins is largely going to be depth because, as Jim Schwartz sort of pointed out, that Hickman has sort of dealt with nagging hamstring and some other ailments that he needs to find a way to, keep his body in tip-top shape all season so he can be more the player that Schwartz seems to think he can be.
Yeah.
But I don't sit here and worry about the safety position all that much. And I'm very curious to see what happens when Donovan McMillan is in pads. He's a guy that stood out to me as somebody that fits what the Browns can do. I thought he was a jack of all trades, master of none. I'm sort of curious to see how that translates when we get out onto the practice field and pads and stuff like that, because if he can be, they've had a great run with this. DeAnthony Bell, Ronnie Hickman. If they can find, if Donovan McMillan be your next guy, great.
Yeah.
If they have to, they can theoretically add somebody else. But I think some of this comes down to name recognition. I still like Juan Thornhill. I know a lot of people don't, but there was sort of like a credibility he had with his name. And I think having him back there with Grant Delpit was helpful for some people. And seemingly he's probably going to start for the Steelers now, which is really interesting. But now they don't have that. So now it's sort of like, they've got Grant Delpit. He's great. Hopefully he can, stay healthy the whole year and put together. He has the habit of putting out great, like superstar level half years. I'd love him to put a full from week 1 to week 18. Great year. But if they've got three, potentially 4 swings to find 2 spots to fill, I think they'll be okay. I think so much of this comes down to, with the secondary in general, is going to come down to what are they getting out of that defensive line. That's going to set the tone for everything else.
Yep.
If that group is effective, if that group is what Jim Schwartz believes it to be and needs it to be, corners are going to play better. The safety is going to play better. And, it's not that far back. Again, 2023, and I get the opponents they played against were not great. The Browns got pretty damn good play out of Ronnie Hickman and Anthony Bell. And I don't remember that because he was a guy I liked, who they brought in as the sixth safety at that point, and they were still able to make it work because the top three guys were out with injuries. So if they can take care of the business up the front seven, like PFF guys were talking about, I think the rest is going to take care of itself. God willing, Carson Schwarzenegger gives them a little bit more coverage capability they've had in past years because he's not only athletic, but he's so big in terms of length and everything else that sort of helps slightly. That could be a potential benefit for this group, but I'm not really worried about defense in general. So insofar as positions addressed, I'm more worried about can the guys that the Browns need to take that step get there. Isaiah McGuire has proven to be a rock solid player. Can he take the next step to be a star? Can Alex Wright build on some small momentum that he's had and become a full service player? Somebody you want to extend. Joe Tryon, same deal. They're both on the last year of their contracts or 1 year deal, and they need that other thing if they can find it. Can Ronnie Hickman prove to be a guy that's worth an extension? That's a starter. That would be a huge get. Can this linebacker group make it work? You're going to have Jordan Hicks for this last year. Can Carson Schwarzenegger be the guy that you take 33rd overall and be a fixture in the middle of that defense? Can Martin Emerson bounce back? Can Greg Newsome bounce back if those guys play better? Particularly with Martin Emerson, you're sitting there going, can he either get back to the level he showed in his second year, or even better, get back to the level he showed when he was, able to sort of shut down Justin Jefferson? If he can get that and Denzel Ward plays well, all of a sudden you're in a really good spot defensively, and everything else is going to be a whole lot easier.
Yeah, totally agree. Todd says about the depth there that it's a fair argument, but Hickman wouldn't hang his hat on Hickman being a high safety. Yeah, I'm not claiming that he can do it and will be the guy. Like Schwartz seems to think he can be a ball hawk back there and rangy or whatever, but I'm not convinced, Pete, but like I am convinced that KZ can if he can't to a good enough degree.
I'm just interested in the fact that Jim Schwartz seems to think that Hickman can do it. That's we'll see. And the other thing I would point out is that Ephraim Banda has been a hell of a coach back there so far in his short tenure with the Browns. He's done a good job with those guys. Again, having to operate with a next man up mentality, putting guys out there that no one expected to, and getting decent play out of them. I mean, if he can essentially be similar to what Jason Tarver has been able to do at linebacker, then that's going to help quite a bit. Ronnie Hickman's already exceeded what I sort of thought he was going to be able to be coming into the NFL. I thought he could stick on a roster, but the fact that the Browns are at least hoping that he can take the next step and be a starter, that would be a massive steal for them to get him as an undrafted rookie. And see if he can do it, and then you just massively improve that the value of that draft, which has already looked good.
Got a question here for you, Pete, from the chat. Lane and Jacob think the offensive line has been toughened up by the new free agent depth. Does Pete agree, or are we still relying on a bunch of old players finding magic again in an old scheme?
Look, Cornelius Lucas, professional lineman. Tevin Jenkins is the type of guy you want as sort of an ass kicker. It's just his body has sort of let him down. If he can stay healthy, he's more than capable of being a starting caliber tackle. You want DeJuan Jones, who looks great in terms of the shape he's in. If he can, regain his pass protection form that he's had, and then hopefully the way he's sort of been able to improve his body, become a better run blocker. that has the chance to change the whole complexion of the line.
You think he can do that? Do you think he can become a better run blocker, or is it just outside of his skill set?
I think he can, because I think he's lighter. I think that's been partly he's just a massive human being, but he handles like a bookcase. Like, he's not a guy that like can be make quick movements and stuff. So being lighter is going to help him, but also it just comes down to mastering the angles and understanding where guys are going to be, so that he can sort of take the route to get there, where he knows the guy's going to be there to be able to make that block, as opposed to, his healthiest stretch of football as a rookie. I expect a lot of that was very fast for him. Just the speed of those guys. And he doesn't have to be a Pro Bowl run blocker. All he's got to do is be functional. If they can occasionally run left, great. The Browns are predisposed to run right anyway. So I don't need him to be great. I just need him to be functional. He can't be a liability in the run game, and that's where he's been to this point. When he gets a hold of a guy, he can do some real damage. The problem is too often he's either not in the proper position to really cut them off appropriately, or he's just not hitting them at all. And there's some confusion with assignments at points and some of those things. So if he can clean that stuff up, being healthy through a whole training camp would be enormous for him. Having a coach who is focused on getting them to run block. I mean, I'm going to guess that, given the opportunity, I don't think DeJuan Jones was going to go to Stanford to play for a guy like Mike Bloomgren.
Sure.
But he's got him now. So that's going to be there. And that might be good for him, because DeJuan Jones, was a guy who responded to Mike Vrabel when he was here. So that type of tough taskmaster might be the best thing for him. I think that part could be big. As long as Jack Conklin can stay healthy, he's rock solid. Wyatt Teller and can be a good player. So much of this is just staying healthy or healthier, and being able to get through training camp without a bunch of injuries or shuffling around a bunch of guys. But I do think they have a more credible group. They've got some young guys to work with, DeJuan Jones being the most important. But Luke Whippler, if he can lock down that center job behind Ethan Posick, who to this point they've not signed another pure center. We'll see if they do before training camp. And then you've got Zach Zinter coming back for his second year. Was at a disadvantage last year anyway. Drafted to a different scheme, so there's a little bit of a challenge potentially there. But Zinter seemingly is the exact type of guy Mike Bloomgren would want at Stanford. Like, he stands out as the prototype type of guy he would want on that front. So he's got to sort of prove that he can make it work with what the Browns are doing in the scheme. But I think Bloomgren is going to enjoy working with a kid like Zinter.
Yeah, I think so too. Serge, we will cover that here in a couple moments. After this next video, we'll get to that topic. So we promise we will cover that, and I have your comments starred, so we'll come back to that. All right. These guys over at the 33rd team responding to the Browns got the 29th grade for their offseason, Pete, by Bleacher Report and PFF combined. 29th. And the 33rd team disagreed heavily. So they are going to talk about that right here.
We've been saying, hey, maybe the coordinator change just helps, but they still have questions rushing the passer. I still wasn't high on Shamar Stewart, whether he's signed or not, as far as solving that. And with just 6 draft picks, 2 of them are linebackers. One of them is this high upside edge who isn't even signed yet. Yeah, it's hard to look at this offseason and say, look at all these reinforcements that were added across the board. There's as many questions probably at this point than there were at the end of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would give them more credit for the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase things, but they are undermining a lot of that with how they're approaching the defensive line now.
All right, number 29 is the Browns, similar GPA, 2.08. And I think this, to me, it comes down to the starting point was horrible. And I think they made good decisions to help get out of it. That's where I'm at with the Browns. They range from D to a B. But I don't think this was a bad offseason for the Browns. I think 3 off seasons ago was bad for the Browns. And that made everything bad for this offseason. The Deshaun Watson move. You can't criticize them for that every year, every offseason. But that is like a triple F move, however you want to rate that, a few years ago. That's still having the residual effect. But I think given that awful starting point, the Browns are doing a decent job of digging themselves out of it now.
I think this is a crazy grading. I think this is utterly ridiculous, in fact. Again, starting point, Myles Garrett demanded a trade. Instead of trading one of the best players in the NFL, they've extended him and got him locked into a new contract, albeit, one of the most expensive contracts in the NFL. But they've gone from their best player wanted at the door to he's happy again. That's good, right? The only criticism you could give them is, I thought drafting where they were, number 2 overall, is a potential gift and a way out of their quarterback hell that, as you so rightly say, they put themselves in with the worst move in NFL history in Deshaun Watson. You can debate how they got there, but they ended up with the quarterback I would have taken at number 2. Like, I would have taken Shedeur Sanders just because I think they need a way out of that. They got him in the 5th round. So they got the same guy, and they're paying him like a fraction of the money they would be paying him if they got him at number 2. And they got an extra roll of the dice, like a bonus lottery ticket with Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round as well. So, and you can argue that if they didn't think that those 2 guys really had a chance of being that answer, that their process is way better than mine, right? Why? We don't think he's worth this spot, so we're going to trust that that the draft is correct, and we'll let him slide till day 3, and then we'll make a couple of moves and trade down and pick up the extra 1st round pick next year. And as much as Travis Hunter is special, he's unique, he's somebody that hasn't come along for decades. I still think the smart move is to pick up the 1st round pick for next year, if for no other reason than you need the quarterback, not the guy that plays corner or wide receiver.
This is why I think the Jags-Browns trade was a win-win. In the Jags situation, can one, say, star player make an impact on the team in Jacksonville? I think absolutely, because you have a quarterback, you have a star receiver, you've got some talent on the defensive side. You add one Travis Hunter to the mix there, that moves the needle. In Cleveland, where the entire offensive line is unsigned for next year, you have questions at receiver. Your secondary is unsigned for next year. You have one or two dependable defensive linemen. Is Travis Hunter moving the needle there, or is it Travis Hunter plus Travis Hunter versus Mason Graham plus the 2 extra picks plus next year's first? It was just a better move for the Browns. And to your point, like if we said before the draft, look, they're gonna forget. However you want to care about our quarterback rankings, but they got our number 2 and 4 quarterbacks respectively, and Mason Graham in next year's 1st round pick, and an extra 2. That's a huge win for me in the draft for the Browns, given their starting point, which was awful and terrible and the worst quarterback contract in history.
Yeah, the other point that I would make that I don't think comes up enough is there is a pretty sizable chance that Mason Graham is a better player than Travis Hunter. Like, I know Travis Hunter is seen of as special and unique, and what if he's able to play wide receiver and court? Like, Mason Graham is one of the top 5 players in this draft. If it wasn't for some weird measurements, like shorter than ideal arms, and he weighed in 20 pounds lower than he was supposed to, like his tape says he's the top 5 player in this draft. They may have gotten the better player in addition to the 1st round draft pick as well. Like, there's a sizable chance that is the case. Maybe not the most likely case, but a sizable chance that they got the better player in addition to a 1st round draft pick next year. I think this is pure hate for the Browns for no particularly good reason. I think they've done a good job overall, given some challenging circumstances.
That's it. They started, look, you can nitpick some of the draft picks. Fine. I would do that. They started digging this year. They started digging themselves out of this terrible hole. I think that's a good offseason for the Browns, given their awful starting point and what we saw from Deshaun Watson last year. Number 30 is the Houston Texans.
Interesting stuff from them. I mean, obviously, I agree. I don't personally think, Pete, and this is just an opinion of my own that I hold. I don't necessarily think that Jacksonville is going to be all that good necessarily this year. I mean, I think there's a wide range of outcomes of what they could be as a football team. I'm not going to make any proclamations about what Travis Hunter is or isn't, but I think questioning. There was some question as to like, did this GM know enough to make that move without ever seeing his roster on the grass? You know what I mean? Or seeing his coaching staff see this roster on the grass as they transition to a new coaching staff and a new GM, or was this just a move to make a big splash? Right. So I think there's some validity to that. And I don't know what they will be, but I'm not convinced that they're going to be a good football team.
Yeah, look, let's say for the sake of argument that you don't give the Browns a ton of credit for taking Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, and you just sort of look at him as a quarterback. I still think their process was a good one.
Yes.
And I think by and large, their whole offseason was a good process. And the problem is it feels like they're being graded not only based on the Deshaun Watson thing, but based on, how close are they to making a Super Bowl seemingly. And they're not. If they stumble into a franchise quarterback, then okay, we're there. But, if it's Joe Tryon, he's here for a year. It's not like it's going to cripple them financially. Malik Collins, they can get out of that contract in a year. They made a bunch of, and I think Malik Collins is a really prudent signing. Cornelius Lucas is a really prudent signing. Tevin Jenkins for nothing, extremely prudent signing. That is a lot of what they did in terms of the offseason. But more importantly, let's just compare it to the Bengals, which was the team that was sort of led into with them. So the Bengals get credit for the whole Jamar Chase, T. Higgins thing. More power to them on that. I thought that was the right play. But if you could, you would build your football team out of Trey Hendrickson. And they have absolutely treated him like dog crap this entire time, for this negotiation process. The Browns sort of, don't make the situation worse with Myles Garrett. They handle it really well. Jimmy Haslam, who I rarely give props to, I thought was tremendous by not inserting himself into the conversation and sort of empowering the GM, and then boom, the deal gets done.
Yep. But
they took care of it. Trey Hendrickson, not done. TJ Watt, not done. Micah Parsons, not done. The Myles Garrett thing is all but forgotten at this point. Like, people were freaking out about this. Oh man, it's the end of the world, or where people on various sides of this thing, and he's a bad person, all this other crap. Done, forgotten about. He's going to be with the Browns potentially for another a contract after this one. Great. So they crushed that. Hendrickson is your best player on defense, on a defense that was awful, and he's the whole thing, and you can't find the money to get it done, and you're trying to shortchange him. You've got Shamar Stewart, who is, I think there's some fault on both sides in terms of the negotiation, but nevertheless, the Bengals now have both of these defensive ends not in the field. BJ Hill wasn't at minicamp. Dax Hill wasn't at minicamp. And Joe Burrow is calling this a distraction. As the quarterback of your football team, you have no idea if you're going to be able to stop anyone at all this season on defense. So to say that the Browns and the Bengals had equivalent off seasons to me is insane. If you want to say that the Browns dropped the ball by not trading or taking Travis Hunter, okay. I mean, that's fine. I think it's a difference of opinion. As I said all along, the only way the Browns could possibly make a trade from two was to get a package where you had to be taken back by how much they were offering. I think they got that. I was surprised at how much the Jags gave up to get Travis Hunter, and maybe it works out for them. But the Browns get Mason Graham, who many people thought was a top 3 player in this draft, or top 3, top 4. Who's at builds on a strength which they really want to emphasize. They get the heir to Nick Chubb, and maybe that's something else they're holding against. I don't know how you can really do that, but nevertheless, they needed to address the running back room. They do that with 2 rookies. I understand that you can sit there and go, we don't know what they are. Okay, but it's not as if they didn't address the situation. Clearly, they made that a priority and took care of it. But I think a lot of this comes down to, what did the Browns end up with a quarterback? Yeah, you can say that Joe Flacco is not necessarily the most exciting or Kenny Pickett or exciting options, but what was the exciting option? And there were things that I would have rather the Browns have done, but it was still a situation where you're taking a guy you hoped could become a better player than they had been. There was no quarterback. Sam Darnold's contract, even that was Seattle's still signing him. 1, it has outs, and 2, you're still signing him with the hope that he's better than what he was at least at the end with Minnesota. You were signing any of these quarterbacks with the hope that they are going to be better, in many cases as a reclamation project. So I think that hurts them. I think the fact that the wide receiver situation hurts them a little bit. But here again, what were they supposed to do? Is this because they didn't draft it? Okay. Travis Hunter, fine. But it comes down to, what was there? Was there somebody they should have signed? I don't see it. I thought this wide receiver free agent class was awful. And the guys that got paid, more power to them, I would have done it. The Stephon Diggs contract is ridiculous. So you're grading not against what were the options available to them, but sort of, their quarterback situation is not very good. Their wide receiver position is not very good, or so you think, or so people are predicting. And I think there's validity in the fact that they have very little that's proven outside of Jerry Jeudy. That's all fair. But I think in terms of just trying to build your football team in a way that's going to put the Browns in better position to sustain or build, or however you want to phrase it, into next year, I think the 33rd team was exactly right in terms of positioning themselves to then make better decisions, build on these decisions for next year. Obviously, there is a minimum level of achievement to ensure that there's no change on that end, to ensure that it's Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, which I've seen this float around, this idea that they're not a package deal. That's insane to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
So long as they are able to sort of have a build with this season in terms of the things that need to be effective, that they expect to be effective, are that they can sort of add to that going into the next year. I think they're in a better position than a team like the Bengals, or the Pittsburgh Steelers is another example. Pittsburgh Steelers, beyond the fact that TJ Watt is not done yet, they sign Aaron Rodgers, which is uninspiring. Yes, I get he's still talented, but I don't know how long that's going to go. Then you make this weird trade with Jalen Ramsey, which initially, before you saw the Minka Fitzpatrick thing, you're going, they're going to legit go all in on this thing. But they ship him out, so they sort of rob Peter to pay Paul in terms of adding to the corner position, but sort of taking away from the safety position. You added Jonnu Smith to be your third tight end because they, like the Browns, don't seemingly have enough receiver talent.
Wide receivers.
And, even if you want to say the Steelers are sort of all in, they are all in to a point because they're still restrained. They're keeping all their major draft picks. And if this thing blows up, or let's say they don't make the playoffs, or even if they do and they go, playoffs and out again, what are they going to be able to sort of carry forward? They're going to be in the market for a quarterback. Depending on how this TJ Watt thing progresses, they're going to have some other choices. Cam Hayward continues to play incredibly high level despite his age, but at some point it has to end. He may die of old age before he runs out of elite football talent, but nevertheless, some of these things are going to end. And the Steelers are going to have to make a transition with some of these things. They've made a decision to get older this year. betting on guys in their in their third contracts and these other things. So, is there a potential bigger reward to what the Steelers are going to have this year? Yes. Is there a much higher risk than the Browns? Absolutely.
I feel like last thought on this. I feel like there are aspects of the Browns draft that I could argue against, right? Just kind of, where you took potentially, and we'll see how this all plays out, but like, potentially where you took Dylan, right? I think you could argue that. And especially if you knew you were going to come back and get Sanders or whatever. And then, but I don't think you can argue what they did at the top of the draft. Like getting the one next year is just organizationally a must in that situation if it's available to you, because you have to answer the quarterback question at some point, and it gives you the ability to do that potentially. So I don't think you can question that from their perspective.
Well, I mean, yes, they need more draft assets, and then ultimately, is Mason Graham going to be good? If he's good, and you have that pick, even if regardless of anything else, whether they Browns crush that pick or not, if Mason Graham is good, and you got that, and potentially Quinshon Judkins as well, since he's part of that deal, if those two guys are good, and you have that first round pick, then the trade was good. You made the most of the situation possible. If Mason Graham is a bust and Quinshon Judkins can't do it or whatever, then all of a sudden it's going to turn into the next edition of the Julio Jones trade. I don't think that's likely, but we'll see. I mean, eerily similar in the fact that obviously not as far of a trade down. The Browns trade down from potentially taking Julio Jones to take defensive tackle and Phil Taylor. Here they trade away potentially Travis Hunter. They may have taken Abdul Carter. I don't know. And then take a defensive tackle Mason Graham. So that part has to work, but they can't, Travis Hunter doesn't do them a whole lot of good if they don't have somebody to throw him the ball, given the fact that they're going to have him primarily seemingly be a receiver. So it's one more element that, you have a whole bunch of weapons, and now you got to do something with them. And now, obviously, they now need a quarterback and potentially more weapons. Okay, but at least they have the assets to now make that happen.
All right, you're watching The React. That's Pete Smith. My name is Brad Ward. This is the next video. Pete already hinted on it a little bit. Some AFC North movement today.
Yesterday was the start of NBA free agency, but the Pittsburgh Steelers stole the headlines across the sports landscape when they made one trade with a big trade with the Dolphins, acquiring three-time All-Pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey and tight end Jonnu Smith for three-time All-Pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick and a swap of draft picks. And then just hours later, our Adam Schefter dropped this nugget. In recent weeks, multiple teams have been discussing whether they can trade for TJ Watt. You can just sign JJ, he's retired, who skipped the team's most recent minicamp. Watt is unhappy with his contract situation, and sources believe outside team interest is likely to increase given yesterday's trade. A lot of reaction pouring into this. Our own Dan Orlovsky summed it up best when he tweeted, "What is going on?" with no punctuation or anything. I don't know. I mean, Dan could be like in line at Disney and like it's not moving and we don't know. But let's assume that he was talking about everything the Steelers were up to yesterday, and Adam reporting that. We have Jeremy Fowler here. Jeremy, what is going on in Pittsburgh?
Dan, I'm trying to make sense of this right now. I actually just got off the phone, talked to some sources about this. And for the Steelers, this was a simple move. They feel like they have a never-ending quest to try to get a Super Bowl roster together, even if it's not perfect. Baltimore's getting better around them. The Cincinnati Bengals offense is getting better. So they figured Jalen Ramsey was a clear upgrade, that they have a guy who can play inside, traditional cornerback. He can play safety. But to them, this is not, the source I just talked to actually scoffed at the all-in notion. They said, we do this every year. This is just what we need to do to try to surround not only the team with the winner, but Aaron Rodgers. They feel like they have the best quarterback outlook they've had in 5 years. They have a capable option. They are trying to maximize it now. And as for the TJ Watt situation, I was told this is sort of the cost of doing business. These negotiations get tricky, they get sticky, they're hard to go through. The Steelers remain optimistic that they can try to reach a deal with Watt at some point. That would be the goal. Executives I've talked to with some other teams do not expect Watt to be traded. It is interesting. Teams are talking about this, what it would take to potentially acquire him, but there's not a lot of feeling or sense around the league I get that he's going to be moved.
Sure. I mean, as long as he's unsigned and seemingly unhappy, I'm sure there'll be plenty of conversations in front offices about, hey, do you guys think we could possibly do this? But as of now, it seems like he'll be in Pittsburgh and they'll probably get him signed. In terms of the trade that went down yesterday and the sort of overhaul of the secondary, bringing in the new tight end, EJ, what did you think about the Steelers' moves?
Well, Gratz, I love the move, and I think you address a lot of areas to try to help your roster get better. And look, this is a maximization of 2025, at least at this point in the offseason. You bring in a Jalen Ramsey who can play safety, he can play nickel, he can play outside corner. You link in with guys like Darius Slay, who just won the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. You also got Joey Porter Jr., who's playing really well as a young corner. And you got to think about the receivers that they're going to have to cover in their division. You think about Jamar Chase, you think about T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Jerry Jeudy with Cleveland. So many vaunted receivers.
All right. I'll say this. Jalen Ramsey, for me, is past his prime. And Darius Slay is old. And I don't know if this is a net. Maybe Jonas Smith makes this a net positive. But like Minkah Fitzpatrick out for Ramsey in, to me, does not equal a net positive on defense. I don't see how that makes sense.
Here again, I thought just acquiring Jalen Ramsey without giving up Minkah Fitzpatrick made the Steelers pretty dangerous. When they shipped out Minkah, that it made it, again, feel sort of like it evened things out a little bit. Obviously, when the second you saw Minkah Fitzpatrick going to the Dolphins, my immediate thought was the playoff game, because he basically tapped in that game. He hasn't been as impactful the past couple of years, but he's still a very good safety. But that game left sort of an indelible image of his career there. Now, having said that, TJ Watt was also awful. I also think there's a more compelling argument to trade TJ Watt in a world where they could get a player for him. I'll throw out a trade here. I'll go Mike Tannenbaum. If let's say that the argument for trading TJ Watt for the Steelers would be Alex Highsmith is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And they have Herbig as their third guy who's also very, very good. If you're sitting there going, we're ready for Herbig to sort of jump and take that next level, and you could trade TJ Watt to Washington for Terry McLaurin to grossly upgrade your receiver position, then that gets interesting. Now, there's financial considerations and all that, and I'm just throwing it out there. If you're saying we're going to trade TJ Watt for draft picks, it's a waste of time. But I do think there's a real concern from the Steelers standpoint of how long do we want to be married to TJ Watt at this point, because you do have Highsmith, you do have Herbig, and it does making that decision to marry yourself to TJ Watt for another potentially lengthy contract now force you to make a move off one of those guys at some point and maybe regret it. That would be my only consideration there. But just in general, I think the Steelers are basically saying, look, too many times we're getting cooked by receivers on other teams. Jerry Jeudy in the Blizzard. The Bengals obviously have really talented receivers. And granted, Minkah Fitzpatrick can do a great job in that. But I think the Steelers are basically saying, look, if we have enough corners, 3 corners, whatever you think of Darius Slay, if we have 3 corners that can hold up initially, our pass rush is going to create enough of a problem that it's going to be tough for teams to pass. I think the issue that the Steelers are potentially still going to have, and maybe the corner situation helps with this, if they feel really good, they can sort of leave one-on-one options. Their run defense has been suspect They haven't been able to be as effective there. They keep drafting pass rushing defensive tackles, which I get. They just drafted the rookie out of Oregon who's going to play seemingly through his torn labrum until he can't, when it inevitably goes. You've still got Cam Hayward. You've still got Keanu Benton. You've got high-priced linebacker that wasn't – I know his stats look very good. Patrick Queen did not answer the questions that they needed him to answer. Again, they needed to be much better against the run. And, you go back to that playoff game, and they got absolutely run over. So I think that's the calculus for the Steelers is, hey, if we can get more coverage, then we're going to cause a mess for everything else. But the Johnny Smith piece, the Johnny Smith piece to me is more funny than anything. It's just build the plane out of tight ends. It's interesting simply because the Ravens still have Mark Andrews, and they have the other dude, Isaiah Likely. The Browns have David Njoku. They just added Harold Fannin. Yeah. The Steelers have Pat Freiermuth. They have Darnell Washington, even though he's largely a glorified lineman at this point. Maybe he's going to be more this year, but that's sort of what he's been. He's very good at it. But and then you add Johnny Smith, who can sort of be like what the Browns are sort of hoping Harold Fannin's going to be a better version of.
He's a weapon for sure.
So you're sitting there as the Steelers going, you got to have 2, potentially 3 guys who can guard tight ends. We want to be more physical. We want to run the ball better than we have. That's been another issue. They want to take as much pressure off of Aaron Rodgers as possible. I think they're going to run more max protects type stuff. Yeah. But does any of this? How many more games does this move win for them? I don't know. And along with sort of the trading of George Pickens, it feels like the Steelers are continuing to churn out of. I don't think Minka Fitzpatrick's necessarily a problem, but I think they're sort of ready to go in a different direction in terms of the makeup of that of the voices on the defensive side of the ball a little bit. And
I'll listen to that. But he's been excellent for them for years.
I will not miss him. I will not miss him in this division at all. I will be happy to see him go back to Miami.
And there was this narrative or this thought that and maybe I just didn't come up with this myself, but Jalen Ramsey kind of is a problem everywhere he goes. He's kind of a misfit guy. Everywhere he goes, there's a problem. He's not happy. There was this narrative that he would only play for one of the teams in LA. Now he ends up on the Steelers. Does that at some point rear its ugly head because he's not on the West Coast anymore? I don't know. It just seems like a weird fit for Ramsey to go to the Steelers. It just does.
He's getting $33 million to do it. So maybe that's what will fix it. But yes, there is a lifespan on Jalen Ramsey and how long he sort of can sustain an area. And if the Steelers, if the Steelers hit a rut at some point during the season, I'll be curious to see how they're able to sort of handle it. Every year, the past couple of years, when they lose in the playoffs, there's always this sort of conversation that the guys are serious when they're in the building, but they don't take football home with them. They aren't bought in enough. Is that something that's going to continue? Is any of this going to sort of change the situation? There's a non-zero chance I see Mike Tomlin coaching the Dolphins next year. That's the other part about this whole thing is that, nothing about what the Dolphins are doing suggests that anyone's going to be the structure is going to remain in place next year because I don't see a way out. And then this could easily be the last year with Mike Tomlin if they decide, look, man, we're ready to get another quarterback. We want to go ahead and make a break in some sort of mutual decision type thing. That's the other part about this. I'll be seriously interested to see how this plays out. But yeah, I don't know how many more wins the Steelers get out of any of these moves. It feels a lot like it looks a little bit different. Maybe it's worth 1. and that's the difference, and it gets them to 10-7. Okay, I get it, but they are. Does it win them a playoff game? I don't know that it does.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, why? Obviously, Johnny Smith is brought in because they are like the Browns, weak at wide receiver, or at least perceived that way. But like, who's their second best wide receiver? An aging Robert Woods or Calvin Austin, right? Like, are those
Calvin
Austin
is, to me, is underrated. I think he's a pretty good receiver,
Okay.
and they are really, really hoping that the kid they drafted out of Michigan is going to step up this year.
Yeah.
For them. But yeah, I mean, it's a similar situation with the Browns. It's and right now, Jerry Jeudy is better than DK Metcalf, but it's one proven guy, and then interesting pieces that need to figure it out. I think Calvin Austin has done a little bit more than Cedric Tillman has, but nevertheless, I think they're sort of equivalent in terms of where they are relative to being that second true receiver. And then after that, it's for the Steelers, can Roman Wilson step up where you're sitting there talking about, is it Deontay Johnson? Is it Jamari Thrash? Is it one of these guys? Is it, the Steelers are in a similar circumstance, and that's why I understand why they're going to keep adding to their tight end room.
Yeah.
I think the question I have for the Steelers is, and the Steelers have the same question for the Browns, is their rookie running back going to be able to be effective for them? Is Caleb Johnson going to be effective in the same way the Steelers are going, well, what has Quinshon Judkins done? Yeah, those are real questions for this season.
Yeah. They do have Warren still, though, who
they do.
I think is a good back. All right. Moving on. So kind of the theme tonight, I got to kind of ease this one in here because this is going to get loud and crazy real quick. But the theme tonight has kind of been like, the differing opinions on the Browns, and we've talked a little bit about the AFC North. Here we have a strong opinion from, and I've got a couple Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show clips to end the show tonight. But this one jumped off the page. I had to clip it and save it for this moment as 1G Bush on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show talking about how bad Andrew Berry has been in free agency year after year after year. Enjoy.
The nastiest work of all time. This is wild, man. I was just going back through them names. Andrew Sendejo, he was a meme in 2020. He was a meme. Get him out. He was a meme. These guys, think about this. We talk. Look at this. Austin Hooper would catch 2-yard passes and fall down.
Wide open trip, fall down. He forgot how to run.
Adrian Claiborne, I don't think played 4 or 5 snaps. They paid Case Keenum $8 million, right? They paid him the highest money of all time.
Highest paid backup quarterback in the league.
And when Baker Mayfield needed to sit down for two games because his shoulder was falling off, they wouldn't put Case Keenum in the game and paid him $8 million. This is wild work. Jack Conklin missed a lot of years. Can we go to 2021? This is easy. We can just go right along. John Johnson, I thought he was the worst signing of all time until they got Juan Thornhill. Tack McKinley, Troy Hill, they got him and then traded him back where he came from. And
Tack McKinley, I thought, did a nice job here.
Yeah, it was reasonable cost. They needed it for that year. They needed what I was calling for this offseason. They needed a speed guy that could go opposite Myles Garrett. Similar sort of track record, former first-round pick, very athletic, hadn't proven it. I thought Tack McKinley was fine. Troy Hill, you know why they traded Troy Hill? Because they drafted Martin Emerson. It was the exact trade they should have made. They didn't expect Martin Emerson to be there. They draft him. Suddenly Troy Hill's there. They get a pick for a guy that they had no use for. It's exactly what you should do. John Johnson, I thought he was going to be a stud. I was so excited about that signing, and it just did not work. Now, but before he gets going,
I blame Joe Woods, though. I blame Joe Woods for that.
I think Joe Woods is the most overhated coach assistant.
Oh, come on. Don't you think he terribly misused John Johnson?
No.
You don't?
No. I think he, again, most overhated assistant this team has had. He was coaching garbage and expected to get – and he got better results than he probably should have on a couple of those years. But the biggest thing with any of these free agent signings, none of them stopped the Browns from doing anything. Mm-hmm. Even the signing the tight end, Austin Hooper, they gave him a decent amount of money, but and guaranteed money and all this stuff. It didn't stop them at any point.
Scored a touchdown in the playoff game.
Literally stops them from doing things.
Yeah.
Every opportunity they've had where they've had to move on from these guys. Look, welcome to free agency in the NFL. Your hit rate sucks.
Yeah, it's
look
never
at the San
work
Francisco
out.
49ers. They signed Javon Hargrave to a huge deal. He does practically nothing. They signed Malik Collins to a slightly smaller deal. He does more. And then they end up cutting them both in 2 years. This is what free agency is. I don't know. If you go around the league, you're going to see a whole lot of this where you get mixed results because, look, your best guys are going to come through the draft, potentially in trades, but free agents, Jack Conklin, all pro. He's complaining about Jack Conklin missing that. He literally was an all pro for the Browns and has been excellent on this team and helped them get to the playoffs in 2020. So if you talk to anybody who really gets into this stuff and looks around the league, welcome to what free agency is. But most of these are weak complaints. Malik Jackson's the one I feel bad for. Malik Jackson was signed to be a big end, and then the Browns were so depleted at defensive tackle they had to play him at a spot he was not really equipped to play when they had the Maliks. He was undersized, and it literally wore him down over the course of the year to a point where he was down to a nub. Anthony Walker, perfectly fine for what they needed him to do. Wasn't a great player. Cost, I think, $4 million or whatever it was. Gave them exactly what they needed him to do. So of the list he's looking at right here, it's John Johnson. Yeah, that sucked. Extremely disappointing with John Johnson.
But he was a tremendous player. I mean,
he was great for the Rams.
Yeah.
But he also hasn't been good since. But the other four guys, I have no problem with any of them.
All right, here we go.
Year. Malik Jackson, come on, man. Anthony Walker was the best move out of that move, but he was giving you 6 to 8 games and leadership in nice suits. That was it. 2022, let's keep it pushing. Jakeem Grant never played it down for us. Not one. He tore his ACL. Taven Bryant, they tried to start.
Jakeem Grant was paid $900,000.
I know.
We're mad about Taven Bryan was a good signing, straight up. Taven Bryan was a good signing. Now, it was a 1-year deal. It didn't go very far, but they paid him $3 million. They got $3 million out of him. Corey Bojorquez has been great. Chris Hubbard.
He turned it into a bigger contract elsewhere. Year that he had here.
Chris Hubbard's in the wrong year. Chris Hubbard was signed in 2020.
I think he was re-signed I think he was re-signed in 22, and he was the perfect
Chris
swing
Hubbard
tackle.
was the sixth man of the offensive line and played 3 spots that year.
Yeah, but you'll hear as we go on here, none of that seems to matter.
Him at defensive tackle. I did one funny.
I know.
And people are mad at again. Remember the anger that they traded him and got a pick for him. So
and
what are we
mad
about? This whole group, I think the entire price tag was about $8 million for the 5 guys he has listed there.
I mean, you didn't spend anything on these guys. Exactly.
Shop. And my mom said, you got to take that down. She said, you're ruthless. Listen, he was on bended knee. I had Boys the Men playing in the background because that's how often he was getting destroyed up front. Bojorquez, he's been pretty good.
Great sign. That's the second best signing of his tenure.
But anytime your punter is that good, you're telling me what your squad is. Chris Hubbard was unplayable at times. Josh Dobbs, they got him on the squad, traded him 6 times. I don't know if this is keep going. 2023. Good. I told everybody here, we need to be, listen, I'm going to take shame on me for this. This is on me. The fact that we was amping up Dalvin Tomlinson.
Remember that?
The fact that we had Dalvin, the best free agent signing we have, is under radar. He had 3 sacks.
He played defensive tackle
all in one game.
How do you know this
against
little?
the Cardinals? And then that was it. He's a nose tackle. Juan Thornhill.
But he did a great job for the Browns when he was here, right?
Dalvin Tomlinson is an extraordinarily good professional defensive tackle. Is he an all pro? No. Did they have to overpay him to get here? Yes. That was the year they tried to get Javon Hargrave and they tried to get Draymond Jones. Who got the best end of that deal? The Browns did. They got Dalvin Tomlinson was better than the other two who got more money out of the situation. Juan Thornhill, unfortunate. I liked him better than most people did, but wasn't worth it. Okaranquo was a good risk-reward signing. Great 2023 in terms of tackles for loss and some of the things he did. Not very good 2024. Mo Hurst was a terrific signing for like $1 million. Marquise Goodwin, didn't he have a health issue?
He had blood clots in training camp.
And another guy I think got paid $900,000. Like, but to say that Dalvin Tomlinson wasn't a good football player, not an ideal fit for Jim Schwartz. That much is true. But very, very strong, stout, effective football player, and had 10 pressures in that Steelers Blizzard victory. Like, good locker room guy, good all these things. Like,
and if you recall,
this analysis just sucks.
Yeah, if you recall, Mo Hurst was the guy that was like a minimum deal guy who had been hurt for years, but had, when he was healthy, had flashed, and it was an upside swing. That's all it was. It was an upside swing, and he paid off. So I mean, no, none of this is perfect, but I challenge, somebody to show me anybody's free agency that looks perfect. It's not gonna be, because it's a lot of upside swings.
It's what did you pay to get what was your return on the investment? Dalvin Tomlinson, I think they got perfectly fine. Again, I will clarify, they overpaid to get him here. Was he a $14 million defensive tackle? No. Did he give you 2 good years? Yes. Did it stop you from doing anything else? No. They needed a credible defensive tackle especially after they couldn't get Hargrave, and I didn't want anything to do with Draymond Jones. Thankfully, they did not get him either.
Do you think this has anything to do with it?
I mean, yeah, to a certain extent. The Browns aren't in, the Browns aren't in Miami. The Browns are not in California. The Browns are not in a tax haven state. The Browns are not who most football players think about, or professional athletes in general don't immediately go, yeah, I want to go play in Cleveland. It's not.
I know, but I don't really think that like in many of these instances, I would just say this and show me the best free agents on the market that year and where they went and what they did. Like, the best football players in the NFL don't make it to free agency. They just don't.
Correct. Or very rarely, yes. So again, what's your investment? What's your return? Mo Hurst, tremendous, way outperformed the investment. Thornhill, Okaranquo, not great. But again, didn't stop you from doing anything. Tomlinson, good, not great return. Marquise Goodwin, there was no investment.
We already know what that is. Okaranquo, here's what I can say about him. At least he was a tough SOB. He was really tough. He played with a torn pec or a torn shoulder or whatever the case may be, but we didn't get the production. Mo Hurst, I liked him. He got hurt halfway through. Marquise Goodwin didn't really play for us either. He got injured. This was crazy. And what is it? Last year? Is this 2024? This one is. Zadarius Smith, they had to move him in the middle of the season. He was good about being in his gap.
Jameis great. He gave us great sound bites and the Pittsburgh win in the snow.
Highs and the lows and 900 yards he threw against the Denver Broncos. Deontay Foreman is a fullback, and they had this man returning kicks for him.
He's not a fullback.
Returning kicks.
What are you talking about?
Nyheim Hines, we ain't see him at all.
No, he's on a
Jason.
milk carton.
So that's all, 3 returners. Goodwin, Hines, and the other kid, Jakeem Grant.
Yeah.
Never, ever touched the field for you. And Quentin Jefferson was so bad that they just was like, listen, we can't play you in the middle of the season.
That part is true.
This is the nastiest work I've ever seen. And by the way, when you combine this with the misses in these drafts, with the Jed Wills and the Perion Winfreys and the Tommy Togiais and the Siaki Ikas, this is what playbook do you have? You have nothing to stand on. And don't you come at me and say, G-Bus just wants to be super negative. You give me a comment and a rebuttal. You can't rebuttal this.
Thoughts?
I can rebut it. It's pretty easy. Look, Andrew Berry's drafting has gotten better over the course of his career. Obviously, people are going to point to Jedrick Wills. That's fine. Grant Delpit has been great. JOK, the best player he's picked out of his control in that scenario. Martin Emerson has been very good. They've gotten value out of late round pick. Like, people are going to sit there and go, James Hudson was a miss. James Hudson was a 4th-round pick who played his entire rookie contract for you and had to step in and play. Like, that is what you need your 4th-round pick to do. Do you want it to be an Isaiah McGuire or DeJuan Jones? Absolutely. By the way, he picked them too. But, like, we have such a weird view of how late-round picks are evaluated. Tony Fields more than lived up to a 5th-round pick, and that he won you a football game almost by himself against the Houston Texans and was able to do some other things on special teams. But the Houston Texans game, he won it. He had 2 touchdowns and 3 turnovers forced and all this other stuff. For a 5th-round pick, if you could ask me today if I'm trading a 5th-round pick for a victory, I would take it. There's a lot of these type of players where people go, well, I don't really think about it. Like DPJ is another good example. Donovan Peoples-Jones was a hit. You gave up a 6th-round pick to get a guy who gave you almost 1,000 yards in the season. That's a tremendous value for that. But where he's getting better is the earlier picks as he's going through it. Now, listen, the Perion Winfrey pick, I hated it the second it was made. I hated it. Look, the guys he's gotten wrong, almost to a T, I have said they were going to suck before they even started. The one that I was genuinely stunned by was the dude out of Missouri, the nose tackle, Jordan, whatever his name was, out of Missouri. Jordan Elliott. His tape, his metrics, all that suggested he could be a very, very good player. Same with Togiai, honestly. He's just stubby. But, again, process, I don't have a problem with a lot of those picks, but they've gotten better and better and better. 2023, extraordinarily good process. 2024, not as good, but has gotten some value out of that already with the defensive tackles. And then 2025, I think I've said this, I would have preferred they went with premium positions in the 2nd round. I understand why they went the route they did, but from a process standpoint, from the Mason Graham pick, excellent. The way they treated the quarterback position with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, I totally understand it. Dylan Sampson, excellent value for what you took for him for. And again, then you add in like the undrafted free agents, Ronnie Hickman, Mahmoud Diabate, DeAnthony Bell, like winning on the margins in terms of being able to find players to add to this roster. Those little victories add up and they allow you to miss on things where you are going to have misses. Welcome to how this goes. Including the most important miss, which notably G. Bush avoids on this scenario because he was the biggest proponent of anyone, which is Deshaun Watson. I've said all along, if you were going to fire Andrew Berry, it's not for this other crap. It's for Deshaun Watson. And you have every right to do that if you're Jimmy Haslam. He hasn't, so we live with it. But in terms of like the moves outside of that, I'm good with it. I love what I'm seeing from Isaiah McGuire. Looks like a stud. Looks like he's going to be has a chance to be the best defensive end Myles Garrett has played within his career. Juwan Briggs, 7th round. Mike Hall, 2nd round. We'll see where those guys end up. If Mason Graham can deliver, if this rookie class which is going to see the field a whole lot, seemingly, those first 3 picks in particular, can deliver, this whole thing starts to look a whole lot better. But one of the things that just continues to hurt Andrew Berry is the JOK thing. Completely out of his control, but I believe, and then Jim Schwartz sort of echoed it in one of his press conferences. I thought he was on his way to an all-pro season when he hurt his neck, but Grant Delpit's a stud. If Martin Emerson bounces back, suddenly that's going to look a whole lot better.
It would
even
really
Greg
help
Newsome,
him.
Even Greg Newsome, my big thing with Greg Newsome, one, not only did he pass the eye test, pass metrics, pass all the athletic testing, all that, you go back now and look at that draft and tell me who you were going to pick. And the answer is probably going to be JOK. They got both of them. G. Bush can G. Bush all he wants, but like his argument only works for people who don't actually study this stuff and don't understand. If you just throw names up in there and go say these guys didn't work, you can do that, and there will be people who buy into it. But ultimately, they're going to sit there. If you ask them, about the investment involved in these players, most people are going to sit there and go, 4th round pick for Perrion Winfrey. Yeah, I wish they didn't make that pick, but ultimately, it's hardly the end of the world.
It would help him tremendously if Cedric Tillman works out.
That's another one, yeah.
Because of so many attempts at wide receiver, right? Like if you could land the one there, I feel like that would be massive. And then you look at like the misses and you go, like you listed Ika, Winfrey, what were the other ones? Togiai, right? Mm-hmm. Like all the defensive tackles that didn't work. Well, I can tell you, and I've been saying this for years, drafting defensive tackles is very, very difficult, and many don't work out. And the ones that do often take 4 or 5 years to work out in the NFL. Like you have to have tremendous patience with these guys. So, Jordan Elliott, those are all misses at that position. My opinion is if you're going to swing at that position, you do what he did this year and you do it high in the draft where it's a more sure of a thing.
Jordan Elliott is a miss, but relative to it's a miss because there's a 3rd round pick and you'd like to get more of a 3rd round pick. He's another player who played his whole rookie contract and started for you for 2 years. So it's not like Ika who just can't play dead. That's a disaster. Jordan Elliott just wasn't as good as you'd hoped he'd be. He's still in the league. So is Tommy Togiai somehow. But the other thing that, mysteriously absent is the trades. Obviously, Deshaun Watson, the most important, and hurts him. But Amari Cooper, great trade.
Great.
Zadarius Smith, great trade.
Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore. I think Pete froze. Oh, you froze. You're back. All right. What'd you say? I'm sorry. We were saying Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. I didn't hear what you said.
No, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Zadarius Smith. Not only are these good trades, great trades, they gave up nothing for them. Absolutely nothing. Jerry Jeudy was theft. Amari Cooper, theft. And again, that sort of allows you to be less than perfect in the other areas, so long as you are getting better. I would argue that Andrew Berry is getting better. We'll see if that pans out for this year. Obviously, you need some luck in terms of staying healthy and some of these other things. But I think Andrew Berry's drafting is trending in a much better direction overall. I think he's on the right track. And I think if you dig down on a lot of these guys, you're going to find that Andrew, at best, what you're going to end up with, if you're honest with it, is that Andrew Berry has largely been pretty average in the draft. And I would suggest that he's also pretty average in free agency. The problem is he's not good enough in terms of he's not getting to a point where now he's making your team markedly better in terms of the draft and free agency. Where he's sort of making up ground is the trades.
Yeah, I think that's a fair evaluation. That I am the most optimistic of all of his classes about this class.
Well, 2023 is still the gold standard for me in terms of process. I will be very if this class can outdo it, given the premium selections, that would be awesome.
And I would say that the ascension of Isaiah McGuire and what Alex Wright may turn into is certainly vindicating those picks as well. Like, so you can make a lot of cases that some of the defensive picks are really coming around. Like if Emerson bounces back, he has a really good record drafting corners for the most part. If Cam Mitchell develops, you know what I mean? I still think I like what Miles Harden could potentially be. Like, a lot of these guys are unfairly graded 2 years into their career when it takes more than that for them to make an impact when you're taken in the 5th or 6th round of the draft. And they haven't had high draft picks for 3 years? So,
well, I mean, obviously that is of their own making, but that's part of the reason I give Andrew Berry some credit. And I think despite the fact he hasn't had picks, that the drafts are we're trending in a more positive direction with limited resources. That's why 2023 was so impressive to have not, obviously they traded down from the 2nd round, but your top pick was in the 3rd round, and you've got 2 guys who are potentially going to start for you there. You've got 2 guys in the 4th round, that 4th round who are potentially going to start or likely going to start. That Luke Whippler, the last pick of that draft, is most likely going to be on this roster. And then you add in Mahmoud Diabate, you add in Ronnie Hickman. Ronnie Hickman's potentially going to start for you this year. Like,
UDFA.
That's never seems to be factored in for these conversations. Like,
it's not.
That's why I applaud the draft process. Is that he's extended the reach of the draft by being able to get these players to sort of add into it. I'm hoping that's what Aiden Huntington can do, or Donovan McMillan can extend to this draft.
I think that it's fair to wish that he had done that, that he has done better. And
sure.
But I think it's fair to say that he's improving and that, listen, like, process wise, and I think the way that he's viewed around the NFL, for me, like, you just hear people talk about him and like the way that he's viewed by other GMs and stuff like that. I think that if it's not with the Browns and for some reason it doesn't work out, at some point he will be a terrific GM for another team. Like, he's going to get another shot. There's no question. So that's just know that he's viewed that way in NFL circles. So
easily the best GM the Browns have had since they come back. It's not even close.
Yeah, Giovanni, you're right. And, we kind of hit on that already. Like, free agency is a crapshoot. And especially when you're not spending a lot, it's hard to really knock the players that are making the veteran minimum that don't work out. Like, I'm sure they'll go after what's his name if he doesn't make the team this year. But he shouldn't make the team. So what's his name?
Who?
Their latest returner.
Oh, I've forgotten him already.
Wait, where? I can't find his name. Oh, DeAndre Carter.
There you go.
Yeah. Quit bringing in returners. Find somebody on the 53 to return the football. You don't need a specific returner anymore. Stop.
Well, if the Browns draft Mekhi Lemon out of USC next year to be a receiver, he can do it.
We'll figure it out. All right. So Garage Beers is next. We're up against it. We've got about 1 minute and 30 seconds before Garage Beers begins. So get your cold one and settle in for the boys coming up next, Mike and Chad. Do you have any parting words, Pete, before we get out of here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, support the OBR however you can, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and then stay tuned for Garage Beers. I did not see who they have for a guest, but I'm sure they got somebody.
Yep. But or if not, they'll be talking about all things, Cavs made a trade and the Guardians are sinking fast. So there's plenty to talk about there. So hang around and listen to that. Thank you, Pache. Thanks for everybody that hung out in the chat with us. And make sure you atone for your sins and hit that like button on your way out of here. Once again, keep it locked at the OBR streaming network, pushing towards 10K. Tell a friend, grab their phone and subscribe. The OBR. We're going to get there with your help. And with that, for Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. We are out.